Yes, Mufaz. Did you got your assignment?
Wait, sir. Wait, sir. Let me see.
Okay, okay.
Sir, the integers. Huh?
No, the science assignment.
No, sir, I did not get any science assignment.
Okay, okay.
Ah, yes, I got, sir.
Okay, yeah, check that. Okay, if you haven't completed the assignment, kindly complete your assignment and submit that after the class. Okay, Mufaz?
Okay, sir. I did
Okay,
not.
because, okay, no issue with that. No issue with that. Okay. Assignments are, by the way, very important part of the class, and you have to be very consistent in solving your assignment. But okay, so what happens after every class, an assignment is being given to you, and before the next class, you have to upload that. Okay. Okay, and whatever confusions and if there's few questions which you were not able to solve, we will discuss that in the class. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So we were discussing the first chapter, right? We were talking about single and multicellular organisms, right? The single and multicellular organisms. Okay. Give an example of a single cell organism.
Amoeba.
Amoeba. Okay, very good. Okay. Now, here there's a girl called Paheli and she has got a question. Like plants, we know they are autotrophs. Okay, they can make their own food. But why we humans cannot make our own food? She asks that Pahili wants to know why our body cannot make food from carbon dioxide, water, and minerals like plants do. Like we know that plants can make their own food by the process of photosynthesis, right, Mufaz?
Yes.
In this process, plants takes up carbon dioxide, water from their surrounding, and in the presence of sunlight, they prepare their food. Why we humans can't do the same?
Because we don't have chlorophyll.
Exactly, we don't have chlorophyll in our body, right? So the leaves of the plants they contain a very important pigment that is a green pigment called as chlorophyll,
Chloro-
right? That is chlorophyll. So it is inside this chlorophyll where the process of photosynthesis takes place. Now, since we humans lack this, that's why we cannot perform photosynthesis. Okay. Now, how do plants prepare their food? We all know that plants prepare their food by the process of photosynthesis, in which they takes up water, carbon dioxide, minerals from their surrounding, and the procedure is happening in chlorophyll here. And the most important part in the chlorophyll is the sunlight, right? So if there is no sunlight, there will be no photosynthesis, right? Okay.
Yes.
So can we conclude that all the life on the planet Earth is indirectly dependent on sun?
Yes.
We can say that why? Because this is sun. Plants utilizes the sunlight, okay, to perform photosynthesis, right? And this plant is being eaten by what? Herbivorous animals, and herbivorous are being eaten by omnivorous, and omnivorous and herbivorous both of them are being eaten by whom?
Plant.
Carnivorous, right? So let's say if there is no sunlight, I cancel out sun here. Let's say there is no sunlight. Will the plant survive?
No.
No. Will the herbivorous animal survive?
No.
No. What about omnivorous?
No.
And carnivorous then will also not survive. So the whole cycle of life will get disturbed and it will stop. So that's why sunlight is the most important, most integral part for the sustenance of life on Earth. Okay. And you already must have studied the process by which plants prepare their food by using these raw materials are called photosynthesis. Okay. So here's a diagram in which the representation of photosynthesis is being shown. Okay. So what happens? Carbon dioxide and water is being taken. So the sunlight which is coming from the sun, it consists of energy. Okay, it actually provides energy to the plants. So the leaves takes up, it absorbs the energy from the sunlight. Okay, and the procedure is happening in chlorophyll, and the end product is glucose and oxygen. You know about glucose? In summer season, you get glucon-Ds. Glucon-D. Okay, it's a drink containing what? Glucose. Okay, and the formula of glucose here is given here. Glucose is actually C6H12O6. You see, every compound you see in nature, it has got some formulas. Like glucose, the formula of glucose is C6H12O6. Okay, my fast. Similarly, formula of water is this H2O. What is it?
No.
H2O. So it basically means that everything you see around us, it is made up of very tiny particles called atoms. Okay, everything has got atoms in it. So this water has got hydrogen atom. This H here is hydrogen atom, and O here is oxygen atom. Okay, so H2O, what does it mean? That H2O, that is water, it is made up of hydrogen and oxygen. Okay, got it?
Yes.
Right. So that is what it means. Similarly, the formula of carbon dioxide here you can see is what? CO2. It's CO2. So C here stands for carbon. Okay, Mafas. And O here stands for oxygen. So it means that carbon dioxide is made up of carbon and oxygen. Okay. Okay. What is the formula of glucose again? It is C6H12O6. Here, C6H12O6. Remember this thing. Okay. So if someone asks you, if someone says that in the procedure of photosynthesis, glucose is being formed by the plants, okay, you should not get confused. Glucose is basically the food that is being prepared by the plant. Okay. Okay. Now the question comes, where is the food made in plants? You already know that leaves are also known as the food factories of the plants, right?
Yes.
Leaves are the food factories of the plants. Why? Because it is the site where the production of food takes place. Okay.
Yes.
So you see, different parts, different parts of the plants like roots gather the raw materials from the environment. Okay. So the raw materials required for photosynthesis are not all being taken up by leaves alone. For example, water, it is being taken up by the roots. Okay. Carbon dioxide, we know that it is being taken up by the stomatal pore present in the leaves. Remember the stomatal pore which we discussed in previous class?
Yes.
Yeah, it looked like this. Okay, This hole here, it is called stomatal pore. Okay, so leaves have got holes in them which are called stomatal pore. It is with this stomatal pore they exchange the carbon dioxide and oxygen into the atmosphere. Okay, so in the procedure of photosynthesis, they take up this carbon dioxide and releases oxygen into the atmosphere. Okay, Mafaz. Okay.
Yes.
So all the components of all the different parts of the plants, whether we talk about roots or leaves or any other part of the plant, which gathers the raw materials, it basically they all are transferring them to the leaves where photosynthesis takes place. So whether you talk about roots, okay, whether you talk about this root or leaves, okay, to be more specific, stomatal pore, okay, all of them, stomatal pore is taking what? It is taking carbon dioxide, CO2. We can write in short as CO2. Root is taking water. In short, we can write it as H2O. All of them are being transported to this leaf. Okay, why? Because the process of photosynthesis is taking place in this leaf. Okay, right. Now, transportation of water and minerals in plants. The roots of the plants absorbs the water and minerals of the soil and then transports them to the leaves via stems and branches. Okay, take example of a typical plant here. This is a diagram of a typical plant here. Here you can see this, these are roots here. Okay, so roots, they absorb water and minerals from the soil. Okay, and via the stems and their branches, they transport those minerals and water to the leaves where it is required in the procedure of photosynthesis. Okay, Mafaz,
Yes.
right? So here you can see that water and minerals are being taken up by roots and being transported to the leaves. Okay, now what about taking up of carbon dioxide? How plants take that? We have already discussed that. Okay, like here you can see there's a close-up diagram of a leaf here. Okay, so when you zoom out this leaf under a microscope, you will see structures called chlorophyll. It is the site of photosynthesis. It is the place where photosynthesis takes place. Okay, so we were talking about inhalation of carbon dioxide. So what happens? There are tiny holes or pores present on the surface of the leaves called stomata that takes up the carbon dioxide present in the atmosphere. Okay. Now there's an interesting phenomena. Since sunlight is available during daytime only, okay, observe this figure here closely. Okay. In daytime, plants takes up the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They are taking the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and they releases the oxygen into the atmosphere. Okay, Mufaz. Now the question comes that will photosynthesis happen during night also?
No.
It will not occur. Why is it so? The answer is no. Why is it so?
Because you don't have sunlight.
We don't have sunlight during night. So what happens during night time? Plant takes up the oxygen from the atmosphere and releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Okay.
Yes.
So you will come to know about one more thing that happens in the plant that is called respiration. Okay. Let's compare both of them. So if we were to talk about photosynthesis, what happens in this? plants prepare glucose. That is its food. Okay, just give me a minute. Yes, my father. So photosynthesis, in photosynthesis, plants prepares glucose. One more thing, it will happen during daytime only, right? It will happen during daytime. And what does it releases into atmosphere?
Oxygen.
Oxygen or carbon dioxide? Releases oxygen. Very good. Now, there's one more thing here, that it is happening during daytime only. Okay. Now there's one more thing that goes into that plants does. That is called what? Respiration. That is called respiration. So what happens in respiration? Plants breaks up this glucose and transports it to each and every part of the plant. Right.
Yes.
So if you were to talk about respiration, I have a diagram for that also. Right. See this detailed diagram here that talks about difference between photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Okay. So what happens in the procedure of respiration? Plants basically they break down the glucose. Okay. Breakdown of glucose happens here. Okay. To put it more simply, you can understand it like this. Plants basically consumes that glucose. The food which is being produced during the procedure of photosynthesis, okay, plant have to consume that also. Plant is not going to keep it in the leaves only, right, Mufaz?
Yes.
Glucose is consumed. Okay, so in the consumption of glucose, what happens? It releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Okay, so while it is consuming glucose, it releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So release of CO2. Is it okay if I write in short form CO2? You will
Yes.
understand that, right? Okay, so release of CO2 happens there. And to consume that glucose, plants takes up oxygen from the atmosphere. Okay. Oxygen is taken from atmosphere. So this consumption of glucose, will it happen for limited time period only, or will it happen 24 hours?
Limited time period.
It will happen for 24 hours. It will happen every time. Okay, the plant will be consuming glucose 24 hours, not only during daytime or not only during night time. It's a 24-hour phenomena. Okay, so this procedure goes on for 24 hours daily. 24-hour phenomena. Okay, and let's talk about photosynthesis also. Let's compare that also here. Photosynthesis. Okay, now here what happens? Production of glucose happens. Just compare the 2 points. Here production of glucose happens, here breakdown of glucose happens. Okay, here what will happen? Release or will the carbon dioxide be released in the procedure of photosynthesis, or will it be taken up?
Taken.
It will be taken up. CO2 taken from atmosphere. Okay, and oxygen is released, right? Oxygen is released into atmosphere, right? Is it also 24-hour phenomena?
Yes, no.
No, happens only
On daytime.
during
Daytime.
daytime. Okay. Now you might ask that, so what about those plants that are found in snowy region? There we don't have sunlight for enough time. Okay, sunlight can be seen in certain parts of the world for very limited period of the year. Okay, so in that part of the world, plants have evolved in such a way that they store abundant amount of food in them, so that when there is no sunlight, they can utilize that stored food for themselves. Okay, my friends. So that was about the difference between photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Okay, now let's quickly sum up the difference here. Respiration, it is basically that procedure in which plants consumes the glucose. Plants takes up what? Oxygen from the atmosphere and releases carbon dioxide here. Okay, and it's a 24-hour phenomena. Okay, it is simply just the opposite of photosynthesis. Okay, now back to where we were discussing that presence of we were talking about how carbon dioxide is taken up. We already discussed that. Now talking about the presence of chlorophylls in the leaves. Okay, so you see a substance called chlorophyll is present in the leaves of the plants. It is a green color pigment. Okay, do one thing, read this paragraph, Mafaz. Read this paragraph.
Presence of chlorophyll in the leaves. A substance called chlorophyll is present in the leaves of the plants. It is a green color pigment. The chlorophyll not only provides green color to the leaves but also helps in the process of photosynthesis. Chlorophyll captures the sunlight and along with other raw materials prepares the food in the leaves. This process of sunlight only occurs in the daytime in the presence of sunlight. Hence, it is called photosynthesis. Photo
Okay,
means light.
photo means light. So the name photosynthesis here, it is made up of two words here,
Photo and synthesis.
photo and
Yes.
synthesis here. Okay, photo, it basically means light, right? And synthesis means what? Consumption. Consumption or production here. Processing. Okay. So the whole procedure takes place in the presence of light. That's why the name is photosynthesis. Okay. Now, the leaves which you see, it is green in color. The leaves basically which you see in nature, it is green in color because of a green pigment called chlorophyll. But you will say that, sir, we have gotten certain ornamental plants, certain plants whose leaves are of different color. You must have seen that.
Yes.
Okay, leaves can be of orange color, it could be of red color, yellow color. Okay, it could be of violet color. In fact, it is because of the presence of different types of pigment. Okay, so apart from chlorophyll also, you will see that there are different types of pigments due to which leaves appear of different color, right? Okay, now before we discuss about the nutrients being replenished in soil, there's one more thing to discuss here, that how do we check the presence of starch in leaves? Look, leaves have got starch in them. Okay, starch is a component which is found in the leaves, but how do we prove that? Okay, so let's perform that activity. I guess you must have done that activity, Mafaz. Yes, Mafaz? Activity to check presence of starch in the leaves. Okay, so how do we do that?
So I put iodine.
We take help of iodine solution, right? Okay, so first procedure is that like this. First, pluck a leaf from a plant. It has to be fresh leaf, not dead leaf. Okay, you pluck a leaf from a plant. Now, next what you need to do, boil this leaf in what? In which solution? In alcohol. Now, what will boiling this leaf in alcohol solution will do? It will basically remove the green pigment from the leaf. Okay, which will remove the green pigment from it. Then what do we do, Mafaz?
Then put that iodine solution.
Okay, before even we put iodine solution into it, we will wash it again with water so that to ensure, so that to remove any leftover chlorophyll in it. Okay, wash with water. Now, after that, you will pour iodine solution in it. Okay, so you need to use dilute one or concentrated one. Iodine solution is also of two nature. It is the weaker solution, and one solution is a stronger solution. So you need to use the weaker solution. Okay, so you need to pour dilute iodine solution. Okay, okay. So what will we observe here then? The color of the leaf will change. Okay, from being colorless to it will change to blue black color. Okay, the color of the leaf will change to blue black. Okay, Mufaz. So that's how this blue black color actually shows the presence of starch in it. Okay, so that's how you check for the presence of starch in the leaves. If I have got a diagram, I will show you that diagram. Okay, I guess the NCERT hasn't given the diagram of this. Yeah, here it talks about it. Okay, although you don't have the that diagram of iodine. Okay, iodine being poured into the leaf, you don't have that diagram. Okay, see how the leaves are of various color here. Okay, figure 1.4. Okay, why is it so? It is because of different types of pigments found in leaves. Okay, okay. Now, next what we were discussing about the nutrient status being replenished in the soil. Okay, you know that plants absorb mineral nutrients from the soil in order to make their own food and for other important procedures. Okay, but how is the nutrients being replenished in soil? Like the plants are continuously taking up this mineral from the soil. Okay, but after a certain period of time, the nutrients may get exhausted. So how does this nutrient get replenished? We are going to discuss that. Okay, so soil needs to be enriched with nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Like we discussed in our earlier class, that NPK, which basically stands for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, are required by the plant in good amount. These are the major nutrient required by the plant. Okay, so only then we can grow plants and keep them healthy. By providing these nutrients, by ensuring the presence of these nutrients in good amount in the soil, we will be able to ensure their healthy growth. So there are almost 17 important nutrients for plants. Not one, not two, not three. There are almost 17 nutrients required by the plants. Some are required in huge quantities, some are required in very minute quantity, but all of them are required for healthy growth. So 6 of the nutrients required by the plants are called macronutrients. Why macronutrient? Because macro means bigger, larger. So macro means those nutrients, macronutrients means those nutrients which are required in sufficient amount. And the rest are called micronutrients. Why? Because they're required in lesser amount. Okay. So the nutrients being required by plants are categorized into two parts, into two categories. What are they?
Micro
Macronutrients,
and
yeah, and micronutrients. So in total, there are how many nutrients required? 17 nutrients required. And 6 nutrients are required in sufficient quantity. They are called macronutrients. And smaller quantities, the nutrients required in smaller quantities are called micronutrients here. So remember this thing. Okay. So does this presence of nutrients gets replenished in the soil? Okay. We provide manure and fertilizer to the soil. Okay, my pass. So that to ensure that the availability of these nutrients is ensured in the soil and plants grows in a healthy way. So we either use manures or we use fertilizers. Okay. Now one more thing, why sun is called the ultimate source of energy for all living organisms, which you already talked about. Read the paragraph here.
We know that the plants use solar energy to make their food. The herbivorous animals depend upon the plants for their food. Animals carnivores that do not eat plants depend upon the herbivore animals. Therefore,
Exactly. Just read on. Continue.
therefore, all of the living organisms directly or indirectly receive their energy from the sun.
Okay, so you see, the thing which is being stated here, we already discussed earlier that all the sustenance of all the living organisms, whether they depend on plant or whether they depend on flesh of other animals, all of them are dependent indirectly on sunlight for survival. Okay, so sunlight not only serves as the ultimate source of energy for living organism in the case of food only. Even if you see that solar powers which you see here are being are running on using energy from sun, the solar panels which you see. Okay, so apart from plants also we have developed technologies like solar plants, right, which basically run on utilization of energy from sunlight. Now there's one more question again to you, that uh, one more question to you is that are there plant parts other than leaves which are able to perform photosynthesis? Let me rephrase my question. Are there plant parts other than leaves that perform photosynthesis? Yes, Mafaz?
No,
No. What about the cactus plant? You must have seen the cactus plant. Okay,
yes,
that looks like this. Okay, it has got spikes in it. Okay, so what about that? The cactus plants which you, the part of the cactus plants which you see, what are that? Are those leaves or modified leaves?
they are modified leaves.
They are what? Modified leaves. Okay, they are not originally leaves, but they are modified leaves. Okay, so in the cactus plant, you will see that modified leaves perform photosynthesis. Modified leaves perform photosynthesis. In some of the cactus plants, you will see that the modified leaves are in the form of thorns here. These are what? Thorns here. THORNS. So in that case, the stem of the cactus plant performs photosynthesis. Okay.
Okay.
So in most of the plant, the usual thing which we know that the most of the plants have got green leaves and green stems. So green leaves, and the usual thing we know that green leaves and green stems perform photosynthesis. But we have got some plants which lives in extreme weather and they have got adaptations in them, and their stems and their branches can perform photosynthesis. So cactus plants have got modified leaves, modified stem. Okay. So these parts of the cactus plants can perform photosynthesis. Remember this thing. Okay. Now, what about photosynthesis by alga? You know about algae?
Yes.
What are those?
The bacteria.
Yeah. They are basically a group of plant-like organism, right? A group of plant-like organism. Okay. They can usually be found in moist area or over some ponds. Okay. Grows in moist area. Okay. So they also look green, right? They also look green. The reason why they appear different from plants, let me just give you a description of how they look. Okay, if there's a river body here, they will appear in clumps like this. You must have seen that, Mafaz. Okay, let's say this is a water body here, and this mass which you see here, that is called actually an alga. Okay, and they are nothing but basically they are group of plant like organism, although they are not proper plant because they don't have got leaves and roots and stems, but they appear as mass in they appear in masses of clumps like a structure. Here you can see that. Okay, so they also perform photosynthesis. Okay, so remember that. Okay. Okay, now why they perform photosynthesis? Remember one more thing here, because they contain chlorophyll in them. Contain chlorophyll. Okay, hence can perform photosynthesis. Hence can perform photosynthesis. Okay. Now, if you were to talk about synthesis of foods other than simple carbohydrate, like you know that apart from glucose, you will get to know that plants prepare starch also. Okay, plants prepares oils also. What about that? Is that also being eaten up by the plant? How is that being broken into simpler foods and taken up by the plant? Yes, Mafaz? Yes, Mafaz, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. What I'm saying that synthesis of the plant products other than glucose. Okay. Synthesis of plant foods other than glucose. So to discuss that, you need to know that plants prepare other foods also, like they prepare starch also. Just give me a minute, Mafaz.
Okay.
Yeah. So apart from glucose in plants, we'll find that they prepare starch also. Like if you take example of potato plant, okay. So in potato, you will see that sufficient amount of starch is found. Okay. And some plants produce seeds which contains oils in it. So oils is also being produced by plant. Okay. And what about the protein? There are different types of seeds which we consume. The cereals, they contain protein in them. Okay. So if we were to talk about starch as food, okay, so you will get to know that some of the simple carbohydrate, that is glucose, it is made by the plants through photosynthesis. Okay. And later on, this is further converted into complex carbohydrate that is called starch. So initially this starch, it was a it was basically a glucose. So glucose is converted into complex glucose. Complex glucose, that is being called as what? Starch. That is what? Starch. You see, this glucose which is being prepared by the plant, it is not stored in the form of glucose. Later on, it gets converted into complex form of glucose, that is being called here what? Starch. Do tell me, did you get this or not, Mafaz?
Yes.
Okay. So the simple carbohydrate, that is the glucose which is being by the plant, later on gets converted into complex form, and that is being called as what? Starch here.
Right.
Okay. So this starch is stored in various part of the plants, right? So this starch could either get stored where? It could get stored in stems, leaves, or roots. Okay. So if we were to talk about this, let's A, B, and C. Okay. We are talking about the starch. Starch is basically complex glucose here. Okay. It is a complex glucose. And where is it being stored by plants? Stored in
Yes.
stems, leaves, roots. Okay. This being stored in stems, leaves, and roots. Okay. For example, consider the example of seed of wheat and rice. For example, seeds of wheat and rice, they are very rich in starch. Seeds of wheat and rice are rich in starch. Okay. So that's how, apart from the glucose, plants store them in the form of starch, either in the form of either in their leaves, uh, stems, or roots, or in the form of seeds also. Okay. I hope that's clear.
Yes.
Now, next thing we're talking about is the oils. Okay. So what happens in this case? Look, certain plants convert the simple carbohydrate glucose that is being made during the process of photosynthesis into oils and store them into their seeds. So what happens here again? Simple glucose, it is converted into oils. It is converted into oils. Like consider the example of mustard oil or sunflower oil. Where do they come from? They basically come from the seeds, right? So sunflower seeds, or consider example of mustard seeds. Okay. So in some plants, what they do, they basically store their glucose into complexer form in the form of oils in their seeds. So this oil is basically being stored in seeds. Stored in seeds. Okay, can you think of some other examples where plants store the oil in the form in their seeds? Yes, Mafaz. Hello.
Yes.
There are
Flower,
some. Which one?
flower,
Flower. Name an example. Give an example. Okay, think of one example. Okay, that will be your assignment. Okay. The third one which we are talking about is the protein. Okay. Now, in this case, what happens? You see, in addition to carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, proteins also contain nitrogen element. Right? What are the proteins which basically you consume, which people consume from pulses, from cereals? Those are those parts of the plant which are rich in nitrogen. Okay. So one thing we need to know that they are rich in nitrogen. Okay. And they are also stored in form of seeds, stored in seeds in plant. So some plant, what they do, they convert their glucose into protein and store them into seeds. In some plants, they are stored in leaves also. Okay, Mufaz.
yes.
Okay. Okay. So it's stored in seeds and leaves. That's it about the proteins. I hope that's clear. Okay, so let's summarize what we just discussed. That synthesis of foods other than plants, what we were discussing, that apart from glucose, which is being produced in the procedure of photosynthesis, they convert the simple glucose into complexer forms, and they can either store them as starch, either they can store them as oils, or either they can make proteins from that simpler glucose. They can convert them into proteins. Okay. And the one more thing you can also add in that, plants also convert them into vitamins also. One more thing we can add. Okay, vitamins rich in
Vitamins.
different vitamins. Example, vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin K. These are all different types of vitamins which are basically found in where? Vegetables and fruits. Okay. So what is happening here? That this glucose which was being produced by the plant in the procedure of photosynthesis, now it gets converted into complex glucose, into its complex form. So the plant, what does it? It is not simply storing it into glucose. It converts it into complexer form. So it converts it into a starch. It might convert it into oils. It might convert it into protein, and it might even convert it into vitamins. So different parts of the plants are rich in different things. Some might be rich in starch, some might be rich in oil, some might be rich in protein, and some might be in vitamins. Okay, and all of these components are crucial for our health, and each of them is being required. Yes, Mafaz.
Yes.
Okay, that is the thing. Okay, so any confusion in regard to what we just discussed in today's class?
No.
Okay. So this is the book which is being followed in your school, right? And site is being followed in your class.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so so far, if we compare from NCERT, we have discussed about. So far, we have discussed till photosynthesis. Okay, so we just talked about synthesis of plant foods other than carbon dioxide. This is what we were discussing about. Okay, now further on, moving on, we have got mode of nutrition in other modes of nutrition in plants. Okay, like you must have seen uh, other plants, like you take example of pitcher plants. Okay, ever heard of pitcher plant?
No.
No. Look, there are some plants in nature, okay, who requires nitrogen. Okay, so the soil in which they are planted, they are not getting sufficient nitrogen from that soil, or basically the environment in which they are found, that environment lacks nitrogen. Okay, so to get that nitrogen, those plants eats up the insects and rodents. They eats up insects and rodents from the surrounding. Like take example of a pitcher plant. In a pitcher plant that typically looks like this. There's no diagram given here. Yeah, this one here. This one is a pitcher plant here. So pitcher plant has got a structure like this. So this is the mouth of the pitcher plant here. If some rodent basically means rats. Okay, so if some rats or insects falls into this, this has got a very sticky thing, very sticky liquid into its surface. Okay, so if some rodent or insect falls into it, it will not be able to come out of it. Slowly it will die, and the chemicals and the enzymes present inside that liquid will start to digest the body of the rodent and insects, and it will slowly eat that animal. Okay, so what is in why why this plant does so? This plant basically eats that to get nitrogen from its body. Since the soil lacks nitrogen, it lacks nitrogen here. Okay, we already know that NPK, basically nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So nitrogen, which is being lacking in the soil, plant needs for healthy growth. Plants requires that. So that nitrogen, which is that nitrogen, it is getting by eating the organism, by eating the rodents. Right, Mufaz? So that's how plants have evolved to survive in the nature. So they become carnivorous in nature. Okay, so that's what we are going to discuss here. See here. Yeah, you see, there are some plants which do not have chlorophyll. There are some plants which lack chlorophyll and they cannot synthesize food. So how do they survive? Since uh, the very definition of plant means that they should have chlorophyll, but there are exceptions. There are some plants that lacks chlorophyll. So how do they synthesize their food? So they survive by eating what? By eating insects and other rodents. Okay, so they have become heterotrophic in nature. So they use the heterotrophic mode of nutrition now. Okay, read this paragraph here. Read from here. Do you see a yellow wiry branch structure?
Do you see a yellow wiry branch structure twining around the stem and branches of a tree? This is a plant called Cascuta, a marble. It does not have chlorophyll. It takes ready-made food from the plant on which it is climbing. The plant on which it climbs is called a host. Since it deprives the host of valuable nutrients, uh, Cascuta is called the parasite. And are we and other animals also a kind of parasites? You should think about it and discuss with your teacher.
Okay, see this figure here 1.5. So cascata, also called amarbale, it is a type of plant which lacks chlorophyll. So how does this survive in the environment? It basically clings on, it attaches itself to a host plant. The host plant could be any plant from where it is getting the nutrition. Okay, so this plant climbs onto a host plant. Host plant could be any plant from where it is getting the nutrition, and it takes up the food prepared by this host plant. Got it?
Yes.
Okay, so remember in our previous class we talked about parasites. The parasites are those animals or those organisms basically which depends on other organisms for their survival. Like consider the example of leech or lice or leech. They don't prepare their own food but feeds on animals blood, and they get their nutrition from them. Similar to that, cascata is also a parasite. Okay, now what about we humans? Can we be called as parasite? The answer is no. Why? Because we don't cling on or we don't climb onto a host body. Okay, we although we basically take up the nutrition, take up food from plants and animals, but we don't cling on to the body of plant or animals, so we cannot be called a parasite. Okay, now have you seen or heard of plants that can eat animals? Okay, so now you know that there are some plants that can eat animals also. We just discussed about pitcher plant. Okay, so what they do basically, they traps insects and digest them. Okay, so look how nature is very amazing, how the nature is very amazing, that how it has evolved to survive in any given environment. Okay, now why they have evolved in such a way? The soil there lack nitrogen, the plant needs nitrogen, and nitrogen is found in animals. Okay, our body also contains nitrogen in it. So by killing that animal, by killing the insect and rats, the plant is taking nitrogen from their body. See how nature has evolved, Mafaz. Right. So such plants may be green or of some other color. Okay. Look at the figure given here. This figure which we just talked about, figure 1.6. Okay. So the pitcher plant like or jug like structure is the modified part of leaf. So this structure here which you see, it is actually a modified leaf. Okay. This leaf has modified into a jug like structure. A jug like structure which basically holds a water. You see, a jug looks like this. Okay, which holds a water. So similar to a jug like structure, this leaf has modified itself into a jug like structure which is called a pitcher. Okay, so the apex of the leaf forms a lid which can open and close the mouth of the pitcher. This is actually a lid. It acts as a lid. It can close onto the pitcher and it can open. Okay, let's say it is like open here. When an insect or a rodent falls into it, this lid closes itself. So that rodent is trapped into the pitcher. It cannot come out now. Okay, and there's this very sticky liquid inside the pitcher also that traps its body into it. Now inside the pitcher, there are hair which are directed downwards. When an insect lands in the pitcher, the lid closes and the trapped insect gets entangled into the hair. Now, one more thing here is that you see in this pitcher, which looks like this, there are hairs downwards like this. There are hairs inside it, in it. Okay, and there is this lid here. Okay, so suppose an insect falls in it. Let's say an insect falls in it. This lid closes on it. Okay, and this insect will get entangled with the hair. It will get entangled into the hair, so it will not be able to come out. Okay, so the lid closes and the insect is trapped inside. Now, remember I talked about the sticky substance present inside this picture. It contains digestive juices. It contains digestive juices. Digestive juices, it will what it will do, it will basically start to digest the body of this insect, and the nitrogen present in its body will be consumed by the plant. Okay, Mufaz. So that's how they takes the nutrition from the insects, and they are called insectivorous plants. Why? Because they basically feed by eating insects. Okay, there are cases where it is found that they consume small rats also, but for most of the pitcher plants, you will see that they feeds on small insect.